Hey YouTube fans, Eric Hayden here in the garden. Looks like the end of the rose season for 2020. No surprise, we're into the first week of December. In fact, if you look on our channel, I'll post some videos from a recent trip to Western North Carolina where they actually had up to a foot of snow in some of the highest terrain. So it's been cold here in the east the last couple days. Again, it's the first week of December. We should be cold. As far as the roses go, I kind of want to show you what they look like after a hard frost, and then talk in this video a little bit about pruning. I mentioned it before. Traditionally, if you have really tall roses going into the winter, you may want to prune them a little lower so they don't get that rocking action in the winter winds. In addition, if you get any ice storms, you could break canes, especially the longer they are. So pruning in the fall is good for maintaining the rose bush. The thing you do have to watch out for, especially here in the south, you don't want to prune the rose when it's mild or it hasn't really gone dormant yet. It's a little tricky here because we don't fully go dormant, so I'm going to probably prune the next couple days because we have had our first hard frost. So general rule of thumb, no matter where you are, up north, Midwest, you want to wait until you have a couple killing frost or even hard freezes, because that signals to the rose to slow down growing. With the shorter daylight, lower sun angles, it's starting to do that anyway, but that's just kind of a reminder to the bush itself not to grow. So I kind of want to show you some of those things in the garden as we are a frosty one. Got down to 24 this morning, which is pretty chilly for Eastern North Carolina. We don't have a lot of foliage on the trees here in Eastern North Carolina. A lot of pine trees. This oak tree here, you can see, doesn't look all that great, but we do have one maple, really nice one, that's looking quite vibrant. So back to pruning. When I lived in New York State, I would lightly prune and sometimes not at all, because my bushes just didn't get all that tall, so I wasn't worried about that rocking action going back and forth. And the reason why I didn't prune too much, or if I did, it was very light up there, our roses would die back. I've mentioned this in a prior video, turn completely black, almost down to the ground. The bud union was planted below the ground so the variety wouldn't die. But again, in the spring, sometimes I had, just a couple inches of canes. It was quite amazing. Here in North Carolina, different type of weather for sure. We don't get quite as cold. We commonly got below zero in New York. Here, we can get into the teens, but often it's many days in the 20s in the wintertime. So it certainly gets cold. And in January of 2018, we got down to 7 here along the coast. And unfortunately, I had just planted some Fortuniana. This is one Cajun Moon. It has come back, but you can see down by the bud union, it's looking kind of gnarly. I lost a couple, St. Patrick, some ones that were more winter tender. And the ironic thing is, one year I had some downy mildew in New York, and that was the only time I lost a couple rose bushes, so they were heavily diseased. But outside of that, I didn't lose anything in New York, and here we're in a warmer climate and I lost things. And some of that, like I mentioned in a prior video, was because it was a new planting. Just much more susceptible to the cold. And we had historic cold. The temperatures in the single digits don't happen very often here in Eastern North Carolina. But back to the point, we've had our hard frost, and the point of this video is now's the time that if I want to do a little pruning, I can do so. And this is coinciding with my neighborhood pickup of yard waste. It's hard to transport these clippings to the dump like I do in those containers, because you've got these really long canes. So I think what I'm going to do here today, now that we've had this hard frost, and I mentioned in the beginning, it's important to do this after a freeze, or certainly a hard freeze, because the roses have been signaled to slow down, and pruning stimulates growth. So I have to be careful here on the coast. We'll be in the mid-60s here in a couple days. So again, I want to do it after we've had a really hard frost. And you can see that some of the prior videos, I let the roses, the petals, just stay on, and just I didn't do any cutting of the roses late in the season, so that the bush also got another little signal that, hey, things are slowing down. I don't need to produce any new blooms. So as I wrap this video up, when I look for pruning, roses like this Moonstone and this Crescendo that just got planted, I probably won't touch at all. But some of these longer ones, especially as I get over here toward Mr. Caleb, and in the back, that Mr. Lincoln, definitely Yolande, Double Delight, some of the more mature roses, and certainly probably every single one in this garden, Let Freedom Ring and Gemini, Hot Princess, I will take those down a little bit. Probably not even a third of the bush. This is not the final pruning because I'll do another touch up in the spring, but just kind of take the tops off the bushes, lower them. So if we get any winter winds, which we will certainly get since we're by the coast, if we get any ice storms, they will be less susceptible to fall over and break. Now rose, this is Veteran's Honor, so again, very, very tall, almost not quite where the leaves have already fallen off the bottom, but just this very, very top quarter maybe, trim that off. And I won't really be concerned, you know how a lot of times we say prune to an outside bud eye, and what that means is, and we'll get into this in the spring, and I do have some videos, but here is a rose, and if it were in the spring, I would want to prune right above this bud eye to stimulate a new cane growing outward from the bush. I don't care this time of year because it is going to be another, we're going to have another prune in spring. So this type of prune, I'm just going to take my pruners and just cut. I don't care where I cut, I'm just lowering the bush. And again, I'll do something like the Veteran's Honor, but I'll probably leave the Sunny Sundays alone because it's smaller. The goal with the fall pruning is just to lower the height a little bit, and that's so that it's not as susceptible in the winter winds or ice storms. It's not to prune to an outside bud eye. It's not to make everything look perfect like you want in the spring in terms of growing in the future. So that's it from a frosty Eastern North Carolina. Last blooms of 2020. As much as I like growing roses, it is kind of nice to relax for the winter, to not have to worry about spraying, and to be able to build that enthusiasm back up, because as crazy as I am about the roses, it does get to be a lot sometimes in terms of maintaining them. So it's kind of nice to put them to bed and re-energize for the upcoming spring. And speaking of spring, here, as early as late February, we could prune. But a lot of times I wait until March itself to do the pruning. So just a couple months, we'll be back at it doing the maintenance in the garden. And hope you enjoyed the video. Again, we covered that some of these taller bushes like Alina, Mr. Lincoln, Yolande, they will be pruned back to prevent any issues this winter from toppling over in the wind or any ice or snow that we may get. So coming up, I just got a notice from UPS. My roses from Palatine up in southern Ontario, just south of Toronto, have shipped. I've got 2 Moonstones and a Gemini coming, and we will pot those up. I've already got the Pro Mix in the garage, so we're going to pot those up and show you why we pot them up and talk a little bit about planting bare roots. I'll contrast it with what I did in New York and the experience that I had here planting in the fall versus the planting in the upstate New York area. It might surprise you where I've had more luck planting before a harsh winter and less luck planting before a mild winter. So that gives you a little hint what we have coming up. Hope everyone's doing well. And again, I always appreciate the new subscribers. If you know some rosarians that would be interested in these videos, let them know. I should say, after I get done the Palatine video, unless anything comes up, probably be slowing down for the winter. If there's something that pops up in the garden, I'll certainly show it, but look for more frequent videos spring 2021, because as this growing season is come to a close, there won't be nearly as much to show you all. Again, take care, and thanks for watching and subscribing to our YouTube channel.